Author Anne Lamott, in her book Traveling Mercies, says this: not forgiving is like drinking rat poison and then waiting for the rat to die. What does that mean? Well, let's talk about it. What's going on, everybody? My name is Marty Mandek, and I am the Education Director / Prison Educator here at My Choice Education. And today, I want to talk to you about forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of those things that a lot of people don't tend to affiliate with holistic health and relationship education and the things that we kind of talk about here, but it's such a vital piece of just who we are. And I kind of want to just break it down a little bit and talk about the importance of what forgiveness is and why we need to put it into practice in our life, especially when it comes to our health. And so with that being said, in regards to that quote that I just said, forgiving or not forgiving, should I say, it's like drinking rat poison. And then whoever you're harboring unforgiveness and bitterness towards, you're expecting somehow hanging on to all of that bitterness and that hate for them is somehow going to affect them and make their life worse or make them feel bad or regretful or what have you. And all it's really doing is affecting you. It's tearing you up inside. It might be bogging you down physically, intellectually, emotionally. It might be detaching you socially, affecting you morally. There's all sorts of detrimental things that not forgiving can do, and it's eventually going to kill you. It's just going to kill you, not necessarily in the sense of physically, but like just it can really, really wreak havoc and damage you in ways that are not healthy and are not good for you and for your relationships therein too. So I kind of want to just break that down. But before we jump into the forgiveness part, one of the things that I teach in the prison is about the process of change. And so with that being said, there is there's stages. There's this model out there, the 5 stages of change. And the reason that I want to bring this up before we jump into more of the forgiveness aspect is because whenever I teach in the prison, one of the things that I do talk about on the last day is when you're looking to forgive or when you're looking to change something about yourself, whether it has to do with a past behavior that you've been exhibiting or a past hurt that you want to move on from, identifying where you are in the process on paper. Sometimes, I'm not saying that this process is the only way to go about change, and if you don't do it or you deviate from this, that you're somehow not capable of change. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that sometimes seeing things on paper can help us do one of 2 things. It can either motivate us to get started, so I have no idea even where to begin in this process. And so sometimes seeing it can help aid in that process. It kind of springboards you into, okay, at least I have a starting point. But then also it can motivate you to keep going. Maybe you've already begun that process and you don't realize it. Maybe seeing it on paper and seeing where you are in this process is like, wow, I've already made progress. Like, let's go. Let's keep going. I didn't realize that I was this far ahead in the game as far as trying to change my behavior or my mindset or what have you. So I kind of want to walk us through those 5 stages really, really quickly, and then we'll jump into the forgiveness stuff. But the first stage, or the 5 stages, should I say, I'll list them first, and then I'll identify each piece. But it's the pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and then maintenance stages. And these kind of go in that order, but you can interchange between the 2, and we'll kind of walk through that in a little bit. But the pre-contemplation stage is probably one of the most difficult stages to be in. And the reason I say that is because this stage is where you're unaware that there's a problem. You don't think that there's anything wrong with the way you think about yourself or about others. There's nothing wrong with the way you harbor this unforgiveness or this bitterness in you. There's nothing wrong with your behavior. There's nothing wrong with... And the telltale sign of someone who's stuck in this stage is personal accountability. They don't have any. It's always somebody else's fault. There's always a finger pointing to someone else. The reason that I'm a screw up, or the reason that I'm behaving this way, or the reason that I'm fill in the blank is because of my past, because of my upbringing, because of this relationship that imploded, because of this abuse, because of... And I'm not saying those things aren't important and definitely didn't have an impact on you, but at the end of the day, how you're living in the present ultimately is up to you. Again, I don't want to diminish the fact that some of us out here and some of you watching this have real hurts in your life. And I don't want you to think for a second that My Choice Medical Clinic, My Choice Education does not see that and care about that or wants to belittle that in any way, shape, or form. We see you, we hurt with you, but we also want you to understand that if you continually harbor unforgiveness towards yourself or someone else, and you allow these things to just constantly affect you, it's going to eventually start to pour into your relationships and just do further damage. And so that's something that you can control. You can't control the past. You can't control what happened, but you can control how you're reacting to it now. And we're going to kind of continue to walk through that. So the next stage would be the contemplation stage, which is where you're aware of the problem and the desired behavior change. So you have that light bulb moment of, oh, I get it. That's what it is in me. It's because of this, and I behave this way because of that, and that's the problem. I want to deal with that. And then hopefully it springboards you into the preparation stage, which this is the squirrel gathering its acorns before it goes into hibernation. This is like putting on a tool belt and then going to the hardware store and buying up all the tools to just prepare to go to work. So let's say that you're a very impatient person, so you want to become more patient, because when you become impatient, you're a very angry person. And so you start taking all these anger management classes. You read a bunch of books on how to become a more patient person or about anger issues. You talk to those people in your life that somehow in the most stressful situations or seasons in their life, they just remain level-headed. And you're like, how do you do it? No, seriously, guys, how do you do that? Because I struggle. Anyway, all that to say, that's what you're doing. You're preparing. Literally is what this stage is called, preparation. And then because you now have some tools that can help change your behavior, so to speak, you want to put that into practice. And so that would be the action stage, where you now practice that desired behavior change. And it's that simple. And this is something that you're going to bounce back and forth between preparation and action quite a bit. It might take years, because you have certain tools that work for certain seasons of your life, certain situations, for certain behaviors. And then those tools don't work for the other problem that you're working on, or what have you. Or they phase out. You become complacent in, like, just with anger. Let's say, you learn to take a deep breath and count to 10, and that works really well for the first 3 months. And then all of a sudden, it's just, now you're doing it habitually, and you're not actually thinking about your breathing and calming yourself down. You just do it because you know you're supposed to do it, and then you continually, lash out in anger. So it's all about going back to the drawing board, going back to that tool belt and seeing what else is there. But the cool part about this is that action can last. That phase can last for years, but there's a problem. There's kind of a catch here, is a lot of people struggle and kind of end there. There's 5 stages. And if you're in action, that's technically the 4th stage. Well, what is the 5th one? The 5th one is maintenance. And what maintenance is you're working to sustain that change. You have to continually work at it, because what happens is that if you become complacent and then you all of a sudden convince yourself that there's nothing to work at anymore, you can actually revert back to the 1st stage. You're back to pre-contemplation, where, hey, I don't have a problem. I'm fine. It's like taking the tool belt off, but you still have some nails to put into the wall. So now you don't have any tools left. And so what I'm basically trying to say is the process of change is kind of like rowing upstream. You're working against the current, okay? And then you get to your destination, and in order to remain there, you have to kind of not paddle nearly as hard as you were before to get to that spot, but kind of just like steady strokes every now and then, just to kind of keep you where you are. But if you were to stop rowing, it may not seem like it, but before you know it, you're drifting backwards, and you might come to and realize, I'm 2 miles downriver, and I just undid all the work that I just did to get myself to that point, and now I have to do it all over again. And so the whole point is to sustain that change, to be in the maintenance phase, and to be in that stage pretty much for the rest of your life. And so with that being said, I want to jump over to forgiveness real quick before we end this video. And I want to just talk about why I brought up change, is because I really don't think, and this is My Choice Education, this is also just my personal belief, I don't think true change can occur unless there's forgiveness in some part of that. Forgiveness of yourself, forgiveness of a past situation, forgiveness of somebody else. And And so all of that being said, there's three things I want to highlight about forgiveness. First off, it is 100% holistic. I don't want you to think for a second that forgiveness is just this spiritual thing that exists and, it's like getting in touch with your inner self or something like that. No, forgiveness is very basic in the sense of it's holistic. I have a list here of just some general holistic health benefits that forgiveness can actually have on you, that has been proven to have on individuals. And that's things like healthier relationships. So forgiving can lead to healthier relationships across the board. That's a social impact. Improve mental health. That's an intellectual impact. Less anxiety, stress, and hostility. That's an emotional, intellectual, and social impact. Lower blood pressure. Fewer symptoms of depression, a stronger immune system, things like that. Improve heart health, improve self-esteem. You can see the holistic impact across the board. But then let's move into kind of the second part of that. It's holistic, but it's also healthy. I'm telling you right now, there is not one study out there, at least that I've seen, and I've been doing research on this for a while now. I've not seen one study that says forgiveness, don't do that. That's bad for you. I don't care what organization it is that's studying forgiveness. I don't care if it's religious-based or just science-based or somewhere in between. I don't really care. None of them would sit there and say that forgiving is bad for an individual's health. It's so good for you. And so it's not, again, just this spiritual thing that occurs. It's a healthy thing. It's a health decision for yourself. But I also want to point out, and this is kind of my last point about forgiveness, is that although it's holistic, and that's great, it's healthy, that's wonderful, it's also hard. It's hard. I'm not going to sit here and say that and try to, I'm not going to beat around the bush and say, try to make up something about forgiveness. It's difficult, especially when it has to do with something that was seriously traumatic in our life. And I'm not even pointing the blame at somebody else. It may have been, like for me, I'm my own worst enemy. And so the things that I struggle to forgive the most about myself and my life are things that I've done to other people rather than what's been done to me. But there are some of you out there that really struggle with something that was done to you in the past or in the recent past, and you're holding on to that. And it's literally like weighing you down. It's that weight of the world on your shoulders feeling. It's like dragging something behind you, and it's your baggage, so to speak. And if you're not dealing with that, there are adverse effects. Just as much as it's healthy to forgive, unforgiveness can lead to all sorts of health problems, holistically speaking. And so with that being said, I'm going to sign off with this. Hopefully, all of you watching this have seen or at least know about The Lion King, the movie. Whether it's the new one that was very controversial because a lot of people were like, it's not the original Disney classic, but I like both. Or the original Disney classic, whichever one is your forte or whatever, just bear with me on this. But there is a really famous scene in that. And if you know the story, Simba's dad dies at the hands of his uncle Scar, and Scar kind of blames it on Simba and builds this up in his head that it was his fault and tells him to run away. So he does, and he kind of like forsakes his entire identity as like king. He's supposed to take the throne, blames himself. So he's harboring a bunch of unforgiveness towards himself and just everything that happened, all the events that transpired. And he starts living a life that he was not meant to live. He's living a life eating bugs with a boar, I think is what Pumbaa is, and a meerkat, Timon. And he's not living the life a lion is supposed to. He's lost his identity completely. That is what harboring this unforgiveness towards his past and constantly living there in his mind has completely screwed up who he is in the present. He's not able to fully live in the present. And so long story short, Nala comes and finds him, and then there's this like montage scene of somehow, some way, through the wind, through magic, through, I have no idea, but the baboon, Rafiki, I think he's a baboon, but either way, the wise monkey in the movie, I know it's monkeys and baboons are probably different, so forgive me, but either way, he catches wind that Simba is still alive, and so he like flips out, and he goes and finds him, and he basically starts, when he finds Simba, he starts to speak life into him. He starts to remind him about what his true identity is. He starts to awaken him to what the reality is in the present. Although Simba is still so bogged down by the mistake, or in his mind, what he thought was a mistake of the past. And at one point during the conversation, Rafiki whacks him up beside the head with his staff. This is in the original, the Disney classic. The remake, don't think this scene is in there, and I don't know why. It's my favorite scene in the movie. But Rafiki whacks him upside the head with a staff, and Simba's obviously like, ow, don't do that. But then they start conversing more, and he's reminding him about what his purpose is, and then he goes to whack him again. And what does Simba do? He ducks. And Rafiki says something so profound. He says, see, Simba, you can learn from the past. You just can't live there. Basically to say there's nothing wrong with looking back every now and then, remembering, hey, when the staff is swung at me, I got hit last time, so I'm going to duck. There's nothing wrong with remembering what happened in the past, but you can't live there. Learn from it and use that to live a better life today. People who harbor unforgiveness towards themselves, towards others, it's like driving a car forward, but only using the rearview mirror. That might be one of the dumbest things ever. You would never dare do that. I would not leave work here and drive home with my windshield blacked out and only use my rearview mirror. That's detrimental not only to myself, but to other people on the road. But that's how a lot of us live our life, harboring these unforgiveness. We live in the past. And it's okay to look back every now and then. The rearview mirror is there for a reason. But what matters is what's in front of us. So use the past, learn from it, and live better because of it. So hopefully something in there has sparked encouragement or a light bulb moment for you. Work on forgiveness. There's no shame in, wanting to come in and talk to somebody in our clinics about this, or seeing a therapist or a counselor, or talking to a friend or something. Do the work. Do it. It's healthy. It's holistic. It's hard, but trust me, it's worth it.